It was May 1953. Two men stood on a peak where no human had ever set foot before. Below them stretched the vast expanses of the Himalayas. Above them, there was nothing except for blue sky. They had reached the summit of Mount Everest, once thought unreachable, the top of the world. This is the story of one of those men, Sir Edmund Hillary, an adventurer whose veins coursed with excitement and an unquenchable thirst for discovery. Edmund Hillary's beginnings were humble, as is common for many remarkable individuals. Born on July 20th, 1919, in the quiet town of Tuakau, New Zealand, Hillary grew up in a farming community. His parents, Gertrude and Percy Hillary, were hard-working farmers who earned their living through persistent effort on their land. Edmund's father, Percy, was from Auckland. During World War I, he was drafted and saw action in the Battle of Gallipoli. Upon his discharge in 1916, Percy returned to New Zealand, married Gertrude, and relocated to Tuakau. There, he received 8 acres of land as compensation for his military service. The couple established a farm on this property and began their family. They had 3 children, Rex, the eldest, Edmund, often called Ed, and June, the youngest. Edmund's childhood was both challenging and adventurous, growing up on the family farm in Tuakau. His father, Percy, was a stern and demanding man who expected obedience and participation in farm work from all of his children. Young Edmund's spirited nature often clashed with these expectations, leading to frequent arguments with his father. Despite this, Edmund deeply loved and admired Percy, recognizing in him the qualities of the old breed, a man of strong principles, unwavering determination, and relentless work ethic. These traits would later manifest in Edmund himself. Gertrude, Edmund's mother and a former teacher, placed great emphasis on her children's education. She actively encouraged their academic pursuits. Edmund excelled in his studies, progressing rapidly through primary school. He completed 4 grades in just 2 years, becoming the youngest student in his cohort to qualify for high school. High school was a burden for Edmund, though. It was far from his home, and he was by far the youngest student in it. Being much smaller than the other children, he was often picked on and bullied for his appearance. He was very shy and struggled to make friends. He found comfort in reading adventure stories, which fueled his imagination. As Edmund matured, he grew into a tall and strong young man. He took up boxing, which boosted his confidence and taught him to stand up for himself. A pivotal moment in Edmund's life came in 1935 during a school trip. He and his classmates journeyed to Ruapehu, a 9,180-foot volcano in the central North Island. Their train arrived at National Park Station at midnight. Edmund vividly recalled stepping into the snow for the first time, an experience that captivated him instantly. The sight of Ruapehu's snow-covered peaks left him awestruck. This encounter with the mountain environment opened up an exciting new world for Edmund, one that would become his lifelong passion. Edmund's passion for adventure was a force that simply wouldn't let go. After high school, he enrolled at the university, but at only 16 years old, he lacked the maturity and focus needed for academic success. Restless and unhappy in the structured environment, Edmund's mind constantly wandered to dreams of exploration. This divided attention led him to fail all his exams in the first 2 years. Ultimately, his burning desire for a different path in life compelled him to leave the university without completing his degree. Despite his intelligence, Edmund's true interests lay outside the realm of traditional academics. His passion for outdoor adventures made it difficult for him to focus on conventional career paths. After a brief stint as a clerk at a law office, Edmund found himself unable to thrive in such a confined environment. Seeking a more fulfilling alternative, he decided to join his father and brother in the family beekeeping business. While beekeeping was demanding work, requiring long hours 7 days a week from dawn until dusk, it offered Edmund something invaluable: the opportunity to work in the open air. Though the income was modest, the job aligned more closely with Edmund's love for nature and his desire for a less conventional lifestyle. As World War II engulfed the globe in 1939, young men from across the Commonwealth answered the call to serve. Edmund initially applied for the Air Force but withdrew, claiming conscientious objection influenced by his father Percy's strong pacifist beliefs. However, by 1943, the internal conflict between his pacifist upbringing and his sense of duty became unbearable. Edmund joined the Royal New Zealand Air Force, beginning training as a navigator in early 1944. His training took place in the Wairau Valley, near the Kaikoura Mountains. He seized every opportunity to climb the peaks surrounding the camp, indulging his passion for adventure. After completing his training, Edmund was posted as a navigator to Lauthala Bay in Fiji in February 1945. By July, Edmund was deployed to the Solomon Islands. Though the war was winding down, he served diligently while using his free time to pursue thrilling experiences. He and his fellow airmen hunted various wildlife, including birds, poisonous snakes, sharks, stingrays, and even a crocodile. However, one adventure nearly cost Edmund his life. While out on a motorboat, a fire broke out on board. Edmund and his companion were forced to abandon ship and swim miles to shore. The ordeal left Edmund with first and second-degree burns on his chest, face, and arms, marking his first brush with mortality. Edmund's military service ended in January 1946, and he returned home to New Zealand shortly after. He rejoined his brother in the family business, and after some persuasion, he managed to buy the bee farm from his father. Despite the challenges of readjusting to normal life, Edmund remained determined in his pursuit of mountaineering. He became a member of the New Zealand Alpine Club, which provided him with opportunities to further develop his climbing skills and connect with fellow enthusiasts. Harry Ayres, widely regarded as the best climber of his generation in New Zealand, would significantly influence Hillary's climbing career. The two met in early 1946 during a climbing trip on Mount Cook. Hillary was greatly impressed by Ayres's exceptional climbing skills and remarkable endurance. Soon after, the two began climbing together more frequently. Edmund's partnership with Harry proved crucial in developing his mountaineering skills. Harry taught Edmund advanced techniques for handling different types of snow and ice, as well as proper rope usage for safety. More importantly, Harry instilled in Edmund the mental fortitude, endurance, and patience necessary for high-altitude climbing. By 1951, Edmund, at 32 years old, had become a skilled climber in his own right. He was selected to join the New Zealand expedition to the Himalayas. The team included other notable climbers such as Earl Ridderford, Ed Cotter, and George Lowe, who would become Edmund's best friend. The expedition travelled to the Garhwal region of India, where they attempted to climb the Nilkantha and Mukut Parbat mountains. Although the team failed to summit either peak due to extreme cold and wind, the expedition was a significant success for Edmund personally. He gained invaluable experience in Himalayan climbing conditions, and crucially, his skills were noticed by the Joint Himalayan Committee, a body formed by the British Alpine Club and the Royal Geographical Society to coordinate and finance Everest expeditions. Later, in 1951, Edmund and Earl were invited to join Eric Shipton's British reconnaissance expedition to Mount Everest. This team explored possible routes up Everest, successfully mapping a path through the notoriously dangerous Khumbu icefall and up to the Western Cwm. The expedition gave Edmund his first close-up view of Everest. He was awestruck by the mountain's immense scale and formidable challenges. The race to the top. Since its identification as the world's highest peak, Mount Everest has captivated not only Edmund, but climbers worldwide. However, technical limitations in climbing equipment initially made summit attempts impossible. It wasn't until after World War I that the British Mount Everest Committee began seriously considering conquering the top of the world. The equipment used in early Everest expeditions differed dramatically from modern gear, both in technology and weight. Early oxygen systems were like carrying bulky scuba tanks up the mountain. They used large, heavy steel cylinders connected to masks by rubber tubes. The flow of oxygen was controlled by basic valves that that were hard to adjust with gloved hands. These systems worked like blowing through a straw. The climber breathed in oxygen from the tank, but when they breathed out, that air went into the atmosphere. This meant a lot of the oxygen they carried was used once and then lost, making the system inefficient. Modern systems use smaller, lighter carbon fiber tanks and have precise digital flow meters. The masks are designed to warm the air and prevent ice buildup. Many now use demand valves, which release oxygen only when the climber inhales, conserving the supply. Some advanced systems even recycle exhaled air, making them even more efficient. In the 1953 expedition, an oxygen set could weigh up to 33 pounds, 15 kilograms. Today's systems can weigh as little as 10 pounds, 4.5 kilograms, while providing more usable oxygen. Early climbers dressed like Arctic explorers in layers of wool, cotton, and fur. Their outer layers were often made of gabardine, a tightly woven cotton. This clothing was warm when dry, but became dangerously heavy and cold when wet. Boots were leather and fur-lined, offering limited insulation. Climbing gear was basic: heavy steel crampons, wooden shafted ice axes, and hemp ropes that absorbed water and froze solid. Climbers now use lightweight, breathable synthetic materials like Gore-Tex and fleece for warmth and dryness. High-tech boots feature integrated gaiters, crampons and ice axes made from lightweight alloys. Ropes consist of strong, water-resistant synthetic fibers. These advancements have made climbing easier in some ways, allowing for faster ascents and improved safety. However, Everest remains an extreme challenge, requiring skill, experience, and respect for the mountain's harsh environment. This reality is underscored by the long and often tragic history of attempts to conquer the world's highest peak. Among the earliest and most notable achievements was the first British reconnaissance expedition in 1921. This venture made substantial progress, with legendary mountaineer George Mallory reaching the North Col, ascending to within 6,000 feet of the summit. The following year, another British team pushed even closer, reaching a point just 1,700 feet from the peak before having to turn back. In 1924, Edward Norton achieved a new altitude record, an incredible feat, reaching a point just 903 feet below the summit without supplemental oxygen. George Mallory and Andrew Irvine, attempting to reach the summit, were last seen on June 8, 1924. Noel Odell, their teammate, reported spotting them at approximately 12:50 p.m., climbing what he believed was the second step, only about 749 feet from the summit. The pair disappeared shortly after, high on the mountain's northeast ridge. Their fate became one of mountaineering's greatest mysteries. Some evidence suggests Mallory may have reached the summit before perishing on the descent. The disappearance of Mallory and Irvine remained unresolved for 75 years. In 1999, Mallory's body was discovered 2,269 feet below the summit on Everest's north face, providing some answers, but leaving the question of whether they reached the top unresolved. The mountain continued to claim lives, as seen in 1934, when Maurice Wilson, an inexperienced but determined Englishman, attempted a solo climb. His body was found near the North Col a year later. 1935 marked a significant moment in Everest's history. Though Shipton's attempt was thwarted by bad weather and avalanches, it introduced a young Sherpa named Tenzing Norgay to Everest expeditions. Shipton and Tenzing tried again in 1936 and 38, but success remained elusive. By 1939, World War II paused all Everest attempts, and when they resumed, the geopolitical landscape had shifted dramatically. China's invasion of Tibet in 1950 closed off the traditional northern route to Everest. This development coincided with Nepal opening its borders to foreigners. However, Nepal's policy of granting only one Everest climbing permit per year intensified international competition. This stands in stark contrast to Everest today, where overcrowding has become a major issue. In 1951, Shipton led a British expedition to explore the southern approach from Nepal, notable for including Edmund Hillary for the first time. The following year, a Swiss team led by Raymond Lambert, with Tenzing as lead Sherpa, came within 820 feet of the summit before adverse conditions forced retreat. By 1953, the British Mount Everest Committee grew restless and decided to shake up its leadership. They replaced experienced mountaineer Eric Shipton with John Hunt, a World War II veteran renowned for his meticulous planning and strong leadership. This controversial decision would ultimately prove crucial to the expedition's success. Hunt carefully selected his team, which included Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. Hunt's strategy was comprehensive. He planned to use more oxygen than previous expeditions and assembled a strong support team of 28 high-altitude Sherpas and 12 climbers. Hunt's emphasis on oxygen use was crucial. Given the extreme conditions the team would face near Everest's summit, they would be venturing into what became known as the death zone. The concept of the death zone emerged as mountaineers pushed the boundaries of high-altitude climbing. This term describes altitudes above approximately 8,000 meters or 26,000 feet, where air pressure becomes dangerously low for human survival. At these extreme heights, oxygen availability plummets, with each breath delivering roughly the same amount of oxygen as 3 breaths at sea level. This severe oxygen deprivation led to a range of debilitating effects, including extreme fatigue, disorientation, hallucinations, and impaired judgment. Even the simplest tasks became monumental efforts. Experience taught mountaineers that time in the death zone was severely limited, with most able to endure only 16 to 20 hours before being forced to descend. 2 of the most dangerous conditions they encountered were high-altitude pulmonary edema. This is when fluid builds up in the lungs, making it extremely difficult to breathe. In simple terms, it's like drowning from the inside. The second illness was high-altitude cerebral edema. This is when the brain swells with fluid, causing severe headaches, confusion, loss of coordination, and even coma or death if not treated quickly. Rescue operations in the death zone proved exceptionally challenging also. The extreme altitude made carrying an injured companion often impossible, and helicopter support was ineffective due to the thin air preventing sufficient lift. The highest helicopter rescue on Everest, achieved decades later, reached only 7,800 meters, still below the death zone. These limitations meant climbers in distress above 8,000 meters had to rely on themselves or their immediate team. Many expeditions faced the grim reality of leaving struggling climbers behind, knowing that rescue attempts would likely lead to more deaths. To combat these effects, climbers began using supplemental oxygen. While this innovation mitigated some risks, it didn't eliminate the dangers entirely. On March 5, 1953, the expedition team gathered at the British Embassy in Kathmandu. They spent 2 weeks acclimatizing at Tengboche Monastery, where they tested their new oxygen equipment and climbed smaller peaks to prepare for the challenges ahead. By mid-April, the team established their base camp at the foot of the treacherous Khumbu icefall. This section of the climb proved particularly dangerous. During one ascent, Hillary narrowly escaped death when an ice block collapsed beneath him. Tenzing quickly securing the rope saved Hillary's life, forging a strong bond between the climbers. Despite fatigue and slow progress, the team reached the South Col by mid-May. Here, Hunt made a crucial decision. He planned for 2 summit attempts, the first by Tom Bourdillon and Charles Evans using closed-circuit oxygen systems, and the second by Hillary and Tenzing using open-circuit systems. On May 26th, Bourdillon and Evans made their attempt, but had to turn back due to malfunctioning oxygen equipment. The hopes of the expedition now rested with Hillary and Tenzing. Early on May 29th, Hillary and Tenzing began their final ascent. The climb was grueling, but favorable weather conditions aided their progress. At 11:30 a.m., they achieved what no one had done before. They stood on the summit of Mount Everest. The pair spent about 15 minutes on the summit, taking photographs and leaving small offerings in the snow. As they descended and approached Camp 9, George Low greeted them with hot soup. It was then that Hillary uttered his famous words, "Well, George, we knocked the bastard off." News of the successful ascent reached London on June 2nd. coinciding with Queen Elizabeth II's coronation. The timing added to the national celebration, symbolizing a new era of British achievement. On June 6, 1953, in recognition of this monumental feat, Edmund Hillary was knighted by the newly crowned Queen. The conquest of Everest was more than a mountaineering milestone. It was a symbol of human perseverance and a bright spot in the post-war era. Adventurer to the last breath, Edmund Hillary's conquest of Everest was just the beginning of his remarkable career as an explorer and adventurer. Over the next decade, Hillary's passion for mountaineering continued. By 1965, he had successfully climbed 10 additional peaks in the Himalayas, further cementing his reputation as one of the world's leading mountaineers. In 1958, Hillary achieved another significant milestone. He became part of the first party to reach the South Pole overland since the legendary expeditions of Roald Amundsen and Robert Falcon Scott nearly half a century earlier. At age 41, an astonishing feat of human endurance, he climbed Mount Everest once again, but this time without supplemental oxygen. To prepare for this extraordinary challenge, Hillary spent 6 months living at an altitude of 20,000 feet, allowing his body to acclimatize to the extreme conditions. Even as he entered his 7th decade, Hillary's thirst for adventure remained unquenched. In 1985, at the age of 66, he embarked on an expedition with Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon. Hillary flew in a small twin-engined plane to the North Pole. With this journey, he achieved a remarkable trifecta, becoming the first person to stand at both poles and on the summit of Everest. On January 11, 2008, Sir Edmund Hillary passed away in Auckland, New Zealand, at the age of 88. His death was mourned not just in his home country, where flags were lowered to half-mast, but also at Scott Base in Antarctica, a testament to his global impact as an explorer. Edmund Hillary's life was a testament to human endurance, curiosity, and the relentless pursuit of new horizons. From the highest peak on Earth to its poles, Hillary pushed the boundaries of exploration, leaving behind a legacy that continues to inspire adventurers and dreamers around the world.